Hello everyone, this is Marco and welcome back to my channel. Did you hear that voice crack? Yeah, well, I'm a bit ill. As I said in my April Fool's video, I've got a fever and I've got a nasty cough and all of that lovely stuff. So yeah, apologies if I sound, I actually do sound pretty bad. So if you can't stand it, feel free to mute me and just look at the subtitles. So why am I putting myself through the torture of recording some voiceovers for this? Well, Mattel have just announced some brand new Hammond collection figures and they look pretty darn interesting and really cool. So I think we should have a good look at those with the images that have been circulating around and maybe some screenshots from the actual Beyond the Gates videos. Let's take a look. The first one is the Hammond Collection Lost World Stegosaurus, and my goodness, it looks really freaking nice. A lot of people were worried that it was just going to be a Jurassic World Stegosaurus, but painted like a Lost World one. But this time they actually went out of their way to make a brand new sculpt for it that actually looks like the one from the original 1997 film. That's commendable, it's great. To me, looking at these pictures, it honestly looks like one of the old school, high quality Jurassic dinosaur toys, or just dinosaur toys in general. A bit like the Resaurus Carnage line. Those were some really quality toys. Really freaking nice. And this has some sort of vibes similar to that, I think. And I'm really excited about that because the Resaurus Carnage line is, I think, my favorite dinosaur toy line ever. I'm not sure why it reminds me so much of that. Probably just the quality in general of it and the overall look and style maybe. But this time it's official Jurassic and I think it might dethrone the Carnage one. We'll have to see in person. But from the very little we can see right now, the Stego looks pretty good. Proportions wise, it all seems spot on. Oh, can you hear the seagulls? Seagulls, stop it now. It seems to have the same articulation as the Hammond Collection Triceratops. And another similarity that it has with the Triceratops is the lack of jaw articulation. It's very interesting they decided not to add jaw articulation this time. They seem pretty adamant to add jaw articulation to pretty much everything since the Triceratops release, not including the Triceratops. But for some reason they just decided not to this time. There could be a few reasons. Maybe it just didn't look quite right, or maybe they just couldn't realistically fit it in because the head of the Stego is pretty small compared to the rest of the body, and they just couldn't get it right. Personally, I would prefer a sculpt or a toy to look better and not have a funny jaw hinge spoil the look of it. So I'm quite happy that they decided to not add a potentially ugly jaw hinge just to have jaw articulation, for it to potentially spoil the look and accuracy of the figure. I'm not saying it's a good idea or a bad idea, that's just my personal preference. Still talking about the head, they are still putting in the glass eyes in quotes, which aren't actually glass eyes. I still don't know how they can get away with calling them glass eyes when they're not. And it still looks a bit soulless. They still need to fix the fact that the pupil is too far recessed inside. So the pupil's only visible at certain angles, very limited angles. So you only see the sort of colored part of the eye and the pupil very rarely. I think that's something they still need to fix. And they haven't done it on this one just yet. But who knows, these are still prototypes. They might have fixed it on release. I doubt it though. It's hard to tell if the detail is all crisp and all of that because of pictures. But once we have it in hand, I'll be able to do a proper in-depth review and actually talk about the sculpt a bit more in detail. But so far, it's looking pretty good. Paint-wise, some people have been not too happy with it, but I think it's fine. Maybe the dorsal plates could have been a little bit more on the reddish side of brown, but honestly, this looks fine. It looks beautiful. Although, I don't know why, it might be just this prototype, but the tail's looking awfully green compared to the rest of it. Just like the head and the front leg, but that's just a prototype. I'm sure it'll be different for the release. It has painted claws as well. Look at that. They went the extra mile. So far, I am really happy with what I see with this Stegosaurus. It looks really, really good. And next is the Spinosaurus. We all knew the Spinosaurus was coming to the Hammond Collection line eventually. There's been several leaks about it, or just rumors, and it's finally happening. I find it quite ironic that they decided to reveal this after April Fool's, or just a little after. And considering one of my April Fool's jokes from a few years back was a Hammond Collection Spinosaurus, I found that quite funny. At first glance, it all looks really good. The colors do look a little saturated, but I'll be honest with you guys. Getting the colors for the Spinosaurus right is very difficult, especially the base color. It's really freaking tough, man, with all the Spinosaur iterations that I've done, repaints and my own sculpts where I paint it like the Jurassic Park 3 Spino. It's really, really freaking tough to nail, but we'll talk more about the paint later. Let's talk about the sculpt first. Now, proportions wise, we don't really see it that well, but I think it all looks really darn good. The feet look just right, and the length of the tail looks pretty darn good too. The size of the head in comparison to the body looks good too. The length of the neck as well looks to be just right. To the things that Mattel usually struggles with, like the width of the hips and the length of the tail and the size of the feet, everything seems fine. They've been rectifying the width of the hips specifically for all the huge carnivores, or the big carnivores. I don't know why I said huge, but the big carnivores like the Giga and the Allosaur. Their hips are just the right width. Mattel tend to struggle a bit with the width of the hips in general, or they used to, but they still do with smaller figures. So here's hoping that they'll somehow figure out a way of making thinner hips on the smaller figures, because they do tend to look a little bit silly. The sculpt detail wise on the Spino, the detail itself looks great. If you remember my in-depth reviews about the Hammond Collection figures, I tend to talk about how sculpting works and the three main steps in sculpting, and it's the proportions and general shape, then the refining of the shapes, and then the detailing. Mattel seem to have done step 1 and step 3 really well, but I have a couple of nitpicks about the second step, but that's from a professional sculptor's point of view. No one else will probably ever notice such things, but I will talk more about that when I have the figure in hand. I love that the teeth are separate pieces. Again, that's really, really nice, and they're all nice and sharp, and they're still continuing that trend. That's brilliant. Glass eyes, yep, it's got glass eyes again, and it's really hard to tell just yet if they're gonna look amazing or not. They never really look amazing. They sort of look alright or trash, and it's hard to tell from these pictures. So again, we'll have to wait till I have the figure in hand. It might have the rubbery jaw muscles from what I see. Also, the tongue looks posable, which is interesting. And detail wise, it all looks really good. Like the scales on the face look spot on, and the texture on the skin on the body and all of that looks pretty great. Now, the one thing that struck me about this figure that I'm not too happy about is that they seem to have completely forgotten the blue paint on the sail. That's quite iconic to the Spinosaurus, and it's just completely missing here. Hopefully they fix it for the release, otherwise I'm just gonna have to modify mine to add the blue paint on the sail. Yeah, I've been talking to some friends of mine, and they all agree that the colors on the Spino look a little off. The base color is a bit too sandy, and the rest of it is a bit too saturated. I think what they did with the Legacy collection, the first version of the Spinosaurus, they kind of went for a more grey base color, and I think that would suit it a bit better. Articulation wise, it seems pretty much the same as the Giga. I did notice that the top of the head articulates in an unnatural way, just like all of their Hammond Collection releases so far. The top of the head should articulate the least and the bottom jaw should articulate the most, but they seem to get it the other way round, and it gives this sort of unnatural look to the top of the head. I will explain more in detail once I get the figure in hand, so don't jump on me right now about it, but I will get more in depth with that. If you know what I'm talking about, it's probably from the in-depth reviews of the Giga and the Allosaur and whatever that I've done previously. And you're probably thinking, what is he talking about? It looks totally fine. At this stage, I can understand that, because they've done it since the very beginning. I've not changed the jaw opening angle for the top of the head, that it's just sort of become accepted throughout all the figures and the community that that's just the standard now and no one knows any different. But I'm a designer and I can see that is a little bit weird. And by now you probably realize that what you get from me isn't your standard toy review from your average YouTuber. Since I am a designer, I point out things that your average YouTuber wouldn't notice. And a lot of people seem to think that it comes from a point of malice on my end, but it isn't at all. I love these things so much that I think it is important to have every point of view. So if you want to hear just the positives and all of that, I recommend you go and watch other YouTubers on top of this video as well. And with all of that out of the way, I still think these are some really, really solid reveals and additions to the Hammond Collection line, and possibly the best ones we've had in the line so far. Obviously, I'll need to see them in hand, but from what we see today, these two figures look really freaking good. Like, really good. I think proportions wise, it's better than what we've seen so far in the Hammond Collection. I think it's better than the Carnotaurus. Carnotaurus tends to have a little bit of a long neck on the Hammond Collection. Same with the Allosaurus, and some proportions on the Giga are a little bit worse than those. But the proportions on this, from what we see, looks pretty much spot on. Again, once I have the figure in hand, I'll properly be able to tell if there's some things that are a bit off, but at first glance it looks like the Spinosaurus from Jurassic Park 3, and that's great. So I'm really, really happy about that. It's a bit of a relief, actually. I tend to get a little bit nervous just before a release or for a Hammond Collection figure, because I know there's always something a little bit off that is going to annoy me, but this time it's fine. The only thing that I would fix is literally just the paint on the sail, and that is a minor thing for me to fix. I don't want to do replacement heads or replacement bits. So seeing that they got this right so far is a relief. Now, for the future of the Hammond Collection, I really hope that they re-release some of the older figures with this new sort of philosophy that they have, the correct philosophy, if I may say, with the correct proportions and all of that, and better articulation actually in some aspects. I really think they should re-release a T-Rex at some point. The Tyrannosaurus is the face of the franchise, and the first one they released is subpar. It is not very good. Compared to these new ones are leagues ahead. So here's hoping for the future. Mattel, well done with this stuff. Can't wait to see it in person. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll do my best to get better as soon as I can. Bye!